my name is Sidney Joseph Locke, and I was born in South London in 1921. My parents had rooms in a flat above a small house in Peckham in South London, and I was actually born there in the room in that flat. I have got one sister, and that is now Winifred, and I can't remember her middle name. Yeah, I think she was born in 1927, give or take a few months. It was about that time, at any rate. My mother's name was Ada, and my father's name... can't remember what his name was. Okay. They were both British subjects. They were Londoners, really, okay. Both of them. My father works in an office. He was a lot to do with the finances of the business. And my mother, before she got married, had a very special job because she designed and made covers for books, and not just ordinary covers, but they were covers in leather. So she worked in leather. And she had lots of little tools which she used to use to make imprints on the material itself. But it was a highly specialised job, and as far as I know, she did the designing of the patterns which were going to appear on the covers. My father was taken ill at some stage in the 1920s, and must have, I presume, was diagnosed at that time of having consumption. And what they did was they sent me to stay with an aunt down on the coast. She had a boarding house down there, and I went and lived with her, and actually I did stay with her for, I should think, at least 3 years, because you see, my mother had all the responsibilities of trying to help my father, or when he was in hospital going to visit, and of course she had a baby girl to look after as well. So they got me out of the way, in a sense, which was quite a sensible thing to do. So at least my mother didn't have to worry about me as well. She could concentrate on looking after her baby and her husband, who was dying. So it was my father had worked in what they used to be a sort of office for accounts, because the firm he worked for, Farmerlows, they were manufacturers of paint, and his father had been the secretary before he died. And when he died, the managing director called my father into the office and said that they were very satisfied with the work he was doing in the counting house, as it was called, and they were always very pleased with the work that his father had done. So they offered him the job, which was a considerable boost, both in prestige and income, of course. And it was at that stage that they embarked on buying a house. Up till then, of course, they'd always lived in a flat, but they bought a house in Dulwich, and it was when they were there that the symptoms of my father's condition, got progressively worse and worse, and finally, of course, he couldn't work anymore. He was in hospital for some time, and of course, in those days we didn't have a car or anything, so my mother had bus journeys to and fro the hospital where he was, as well as looking after the baby. So she had a very hard life, and it was good. It was a good thing to get me out of the way, because that was one thing less for her to cope with. But I don't know, when I came back, she had at that stage, I think, started to get someone to be boarders in the house, because they had this mortgage, of course, and Farmerlows, what they did, and I think this gives you some indication of what prestige my father had got. They bought the house outright for my mother, so she never paid any more. The Farmerlows took up the bill, and they finished buying the house, which was a wonderful gesture. And of course, it gives you some idea of how well he was looked upon, as an employee. So so she didn't have to worry about paying the mortgage, but then of course she had no income, because I don't know the details of this, but my father had never taken out any sort of insurance against illness. So you've got to remember, of course, this before the national health system existed, and consequently, she had no income coming in, and she didn't want either myself or my sister to be put in a children's orphanage, and she was determined she was going to look after her children herself, not give someone else the job. So she started taking in boarders, and that way she was able to have some income to help with general maintenance and all the rest of it. And she remained having boarders really right up to the outbreak of the war. So we had all sorts of different people over the years. Many of them were school teachers, and some were office workers of one kind or another. So I had quite a lot of stimulation from people, because they used to take me out. One chap, for instance, had a car, a two-seater car. Well, of course, in those days, anyone owning a car was in a class of their own. But he used to take me out in his car sometime, and that was a very proud moment to be sitting in a car and going around. But we had some quite interesting people.